As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. For over 50 years, Roger has created, sold, or managed many small businesses. But in 2001, he switched course and began working as a master tax advisor and IRS Enrolled Agent. In that time, he has watched hundreds of small business owners lose thousands of dollars needlessly. So recently, he made it his mission to provide entrepreneurs the knowledge to build a solid foundation under their businesses to keep more money in their pockets, give less to the government, and fulfill their dreams of a successful business. So, Roger, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here. You're covering something that I have a passion for, which sounds really odd because you don't really hear many people saying they have a passion for taxes. But it comes back to a quote that I heard years ago. It was by Learned Hand, who is a very famous jurist, who said there are two different tax systems in the U.S., one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and both are legal. And I'm a huge fan of, especially as small business owners, becoming as educated as we can about maximizing our taxes. And so I'm just really happy to see you here for a lot of different reasons, but it's just something that's a personal project for me. So thank you. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm really appreciate you inviting me.
Anytime. So what I'd like to do is let's start off with a bit of your background, because you have an impressive background in your industry. I'd like it, we went through the bio and they heard in the intro kind of a bit of an intro on you, but what specifically do you do? Like, what's your niche inside of, being a master tax advisor, IRS enrollment agent, and what does IRS enrollment agent mean too? So let's get a couple of questions.
That's a good question. Most people have no idea what an IRS enrolled agent is.
I don't. Yeah.
And it's one of the things that you really need to know when you're going out and finding somebody to handle your business taxes. Now, there's several different types of occupations that are allowed to represent people before the IRS, the same way a lawyer would represent you at a court. You can represent people in the IRS. One is a CPA by default, one is a lawyer by default, but usually they only go into criminal things. And the other is an enrolled agent. An IRS enrolled agent is actually the only person that can represent people before the IRS that actually has to earn it from their tax knowledge. To become an enrolled IRS agent, you have to take three-hour tests at a testing center, and it takes the full 3 hours, and most people do not pass it the first time because it's written in IREs. And so you have to really, really know. I mean, the first test is on personal taxes and all the various schedules that go with that. The second test is on businesses, all the various business formats and all the taxes on that. The third part is on Circular 230, which goes into all of the requirements, the penalties, the timing, all the nuts and bolts of all these things if you don't do it right, and the ethics that you have to take ethics every year. The ethics that you have to adhere to represent people before the IRS. So if you want somebody with tax knowledge, go find an enrolled agent, and because those are the ones that every single year I have to take 25 continuing hours of education just on tax updates and tax knowledge to renew my certification. So it's a lot of work doing that. But on the other hand, it allows me to have the knowledge and the background to really be able to help people better.
So you have a very deep understanding of taxes and how they can go wrong.
That's correct. Yes, You have to. You have to. Absolutely.
And I think it's important because, we have this unintentional business partner, Uncle Sam, and knowing these differences is a huge deal, especially as a small business owner. I forget it. I heard it quoted once, how many deductions there are for small businesses. I mean, it's obvious that it's stacked, in our favor. I think the number of things that we can do to reduce our tax burden, I think is stacked in our favor, but I think it was some huge number, right? I don't know if you know the number of.
It is when you get into all the credits. I think a lot, people always hear all these big corporations, they never pay any taxes. And the reason they can reduce their tax liabilities is simply they hire the people that know how to use all the tax laws that were passed to incentivize businesses. Well, business credits and things to incentivize business. Actually, is probably to pay off a donor or something that they passed a bill for. Is generally what a lot is. It is. It's the truth.
We'll get into that a little bit.
And a good tax professional is going to be able to use those same laws on a smaller scale for a small business. And that's really the difference between a good and a bad tax preparer, is if they know those laws and they can find the ones that apply to your particular business. The other part of that is, are they willing to learn your particular business? Because every single business owner that I work with, I have to learn how they work their business. So I know how to do a lot of businesses because I've had to learn that. But I can't do a good job for them if I don't know how they work, or if I don't know their business, if I don't know what they buy, who they hire, and everything else, and why they do it. I have to know all of those things. And so that's one thing that's going to determine whether somebody's going to do a good job for you, if they have enough interest to even learn that.
And now I fall into this weird situation where, like, when I'm trying to get like NAICR codes and things like that for taxes, nobody has any idea where the hell to put me. So, because it's mostly online learning as an independent contractor, and Keynote Architect is not on anyone's career list. Like, it doesn't show up in these lists. What do I do if I'm in a situation like that, where it's sort of, my description is other? It would be a pretty specialized person, and almost a unicorn to find someone who would even have like a basic level of knowledge. What would you do in a situation like that?
Whoa. If you find somebody like that.
The reason I ask this question is that in my industry, it is hard. We're instructional designers. That's the technical term, but this is a number one question for us. Is a lot of people don't really understand what we do. And so finding people who can handle a weird situation or like us has been a huge question. So I figured I'd mention it, see what to do.
I think the important thing is not necessarily that somebody knows what your profession is, but if finding somebody that wants to learn what your profession is.
Okay.
And that's actually more important, because if you can just find somebody, oh yeah, that person does blah, 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 that doesn't mean they know. That doesn't mean they know how you work. That doesn't mean they know how you run your business. That's more important than finding somebody who just knows what the terminology means.
Got it. Okay. So you're willing to partner with people versus this isn't transactional. It's more, I'm willing to partner with you and stick with you, learn what's going on, and actually become a partner in this versus
exactly
my taxes.
And looking at it the reverse way is that if you owned a plumbing company and you were going to hire a plumber, would you sit down and interview that plumber to know if they knew what they were doing? And it's no different than if you're hiring an accountant and a tax professional. You need to be able to sit down and interview that person to see if they know what they're talking about, if they have an interest in you, or whether you just feel like you're another number, to them. One of the things that I teach, but see, a lot of people, because I run into so many people that say, well, I don't have to learn all that stuff. I'll just hire an accountant, or I'll hire a tax professional, and they'll just take care of all of that for me off my plate. I don't have to worry. I don't have to spend my time learning. For some reason, learning has become a bad thing in this day and age of instant gratification. And that's one of the things that I do, is I create courses and things for people to learn the basic things that they need to know in the areas of legal formation, organizing your paperwork properly, and tax ramifications of your decisions. Now, if you know the basics of those three things, you can sit down and you can interview any accountant, you can interview any tax professional and find out if they know what they're talking about. You add to that knowledge the whether they're willing to partner with you, and if they pass both of those things, then you probably want this person on your team, because they're going to be an asset. you know, and unfortunately, people don't go through that process, you
Well,
know.
I think it's more that we see, because I've made this mistake and I've been burned because of it. And for us, I think we see the CPA or the tax preparer or the tax professional in our thing as a cost that I don't want to deal with it. I mean, I don't like paying taxes, and it's part of what we have to do, but I don't like paying them, and so it's something that I'm not good at. I don't like doing, and we give it the amount of attention that it gets in our mind, which is almost minimal. And I think that's really kind of what happens. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. That's why I'm excited to talk to you about this. Is maybe we're not going to go into deep into taxes, but I want to give like these little look at this, ask this question, do these things, just to make it a little bit easier for us instead of having this big thing. And a lot of us have had, bad experiences with having taxes done. I know I had a friend with almost $250,000 tax bill due to a mistake. And what are some of the questions and what are some of the things, that we should ask as entrepreneurs when we're sitting down with a tax professional? What are some of the questions that you would ask with your experience and seeing it go right and wrong? What are some things you would ask?
Well, so I tell people one of the first things they should always ask anybody that they're going to have to do their taxes is how many continuing education hours a year do you take in taxes? It's a very good question, because a CPA is not required to take any. They have to take a basic tax class to get their original certification. But as far as continuing hours, unless they've changed something very recently, they don't ever have to take that again. And a lot of CPA firms, you'll find they consider taxes as a side business. That's just extra money. And that's why they file extensions for everybody and just take care of it later, which something just drives me crazy too. The other type of things is ask them about depreciation. What's your theories on depreciation?
Okay.
And see if they know what they're talking about. Because one of the biggest tax laws, greatest things is the depreciation table is Section 179. Because like when you buy something that has a life more than 1 year, like a computer system or machinery or whatever, computer system is considered 5-year property. That means the government says you're supposed to depreciate it over 5 years. But as with most tax laws, there's an exception to the rule. And the exception to the rule in depreciation is that you can advance depreciate and take the whole thing this year if you want, instead of over 5 years. Section 179 allows the same thing, allows you to take it this year instead of going over, or you can spread that out to a couple of years on that, depending on. So this is what the big corporations do. They have 5-year plans, and a small business owner really should have a 5-year plan too, because they say, okay, if I'm going to buy a piece of machinery, they have these big accountants. They sit there, tax people, they sit there and they go, okay, let's look out 5 years, what equipment we're going to buy, when we're planning on buying it, and how do we apply all the depreciation laws to reduce our taxability the most. These are the things that a good tax professional should be doing for you, even if you're a small business. Now, if you're for service-oriented business, it's not as bad as if you have to buy a lot of machineries, and if you've got the plumbing or a services business, basically, you're buying equipment all the time. But the same principles apply. And so these things, they should be able to have an intelligent conversation. If they kind of hem and haw and just kind of try to change the subject, then I'd be very skeptical of this person, because I love talking about depreciation laws with people if they'll listen to me, and what you can do with them, and how, use the phone. Because a lot of people think, well, you're just a numbers person. I says, no, I'm not. My job as a tax professional is to know how to use the tax laws against the government to favor my client. And that's what a good tax professional is going to do for you. And this is the type of feeling that you want to walk out with when you're interviewing somebody. Is this person in my corner? Does he know what he needs to know to use the tax laws to save me money, because a lot of people going into this business, especially the first time, don't realize that taxes is their number one expense.
Mhm.
Number one. I mean, you go into a sole proprietorship in some of these high tax states, and
Uh-huh.
you could pay up to, between taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, and payroll taxes, up to 50% of your net profit. Wham, right out of your pocket to the government.
Mhm.
And and, I work with a lot of first time people, they're trying their hand out as a small business, and they come in and they sit down, and you've lost a lot of money after you pay the government, and
Mhm.
they just freak out.
Yeah.
You know, I've
Yeah.
had some people just say, "Oh, this is not for me," and run the other way, and go back to a 9 to 5. But that's one of the things that you really have to know.
Mhm. Exactly. And it is something that like I said at the beginning of the show, I think that every person needs a good CPA, and that's the very first person you should ever hire on your team before a lawyer, because you'll need the CPA first.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I believe it's such an important part, because I have seen friends of mine who have had massive tax bills, and I've seen others who are in similar situations who have had very small tax bills, and knowing that there is a difference. It must be, you can tell who has a good accountant and who does not. Does not have the person who's doing additional research on taxes. I did not know that about CPAs, that they did not require CEs for taxes, because I think that's the number one thing that they would have. Would be
Well,
yeah.
and that goes back to my statement that a lot of accountants refer to you view it as a side business, extra
Mhm.
income.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So they go through the motions.
Mm.
And a lot of people, I think the thing you also should consider, the person that does your accounting, the person that does your taxes does not have to be the same person.
Hmm.
And oftentimes it may be more advantageous for you not to have the same person for those two things, simply
Interesting.
because one can check the other.
Yeah. Interesting. I never thought about that. I never did.
And most people don't. Most people
Yeah.
don't, because I inherited the mess. When a CPA retires or whatever, or a lot of reasons, they quit their business, and I inherit these people, and I see
Mhm.
the mistakes that have been made, and some can be corrected, some can't. But one of the things, and I do have a lot of people I do taxes for. It. I don't do their accounting. I just do
Mhm.
their taxes. That's all I do. That's what
Mhm.
I'm an expert at. And they have somebody else do their accounting. They bring the P&Ls to me. If
Yeah.
I don't find something on the P&L that looks right, I start asking questions.
Yeah.
And sometimes they've changed accountants
Mhm.
because the accountant wasn't doing it properly and I caught it.
Mhm.
So that's one other thing that you should take into consideration when bringing these people on your team.
Mhm. Now, talking about taxes, and I know there's a lot of like little loopholes in taxes and a lot of little things that people don't think about. So we were talking about 179 deduction, and when I bought my Jeep, I asked what the gross weight was, and they said 5,500 pounds. I said, okay, can we get two fat guys and sit them in the back seat to get it over 6,000 so I can take some of this stuff? Because I had had somebody who had explained a 179 deduction and how I can do it. So I was able to ask these questions. So, what are some of the common what are some of the common questions that business owners should be asking, or should be aware of? Like some of the deductions, Augusta Rule 179. There's a couple of weird ones that people may not know about. What are some of the ones in your experience that people don't think about but should?
Well, there's a lot of small business credits out there.
Mhm.
And that's one thing that is not pushed a lot in the small business community, and even the tax industry. There's people not those. They're mainly written for larger companies,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that some of them couldn't apply to you.
Mhm.
So there's something that they need to be. I mean, there are dozens of them. There are
Mhm.
dozens
Yeah.
of them, and especially when you get into areas of all this new save the planet stuff, the alternate fuels and all that stuff. I mean, if you're into using that, then you should be looking at some of the credits, because there are credits out there for things like that also.
Interesting. And I think we don't think about the number of credits that we have, and we don't think about the little detailed, and like what we were saying earlier, where it's really a partnership. Instead of just handing somebody your tax documents and say in a week, now it's been filed, you're done. Having that partnership can make it can help you to understand what these little pitfalls is, and they can save you a significant amount of money. I mean, it's not like this is like, $100 or $200 here and there. It's pretty big, right?
Oh yeah, it can be. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tens of
and
thousands.
and the other thing that people a lot of realize, I mean, a lot of people they'll start at they don't understand the legal concepts and the tax consequences of the legal concepts. And there's a lot of things. Well, I'll give you an example. I had a lady come to me a couple years ago that she had just started a new business as a home chef. And she must be a really good home chef because her net profit the first year was $100,000.
Wow.
And she had done nothing else, no legal, no nothing. Well, by default, you're a sole proprietor, Schedule C, sole proprietor. She came to me up early enough in the year that I was able to help her using some of the exceptions to the rule that she, instead of owing a $6,000 tax bill, her and her husband got a $2,000 refund by being able to restructure her and use the laws to restructure her in time that we could do that. On the other hand, I had clients come to me that he was selling energy contracts. His friend asked him if he wanted a job selling energy contracts. Didn't know there was such a thing where different energy companies sell energy back and forth, $250,000 profit the first year. Commissions were $250,000. He kept no books. He commingled funds between everything out of his personal checkbook. Yep. He had a 3-state area, kept no mileage logs. And he brought this to me and I said, well, we'll reconstruct as much as we can, but you're going to be audited. And here's what you need to do. We need to restructure you. You need to do this. This is what you need to keep track of, so forth and so on. So all the things I normally teach. Came back to me the second year. The only thing he'd done is open a business checking account. So we tried to reconstruct again. I said, you're going to be audited. And about 6 months later, the audit letter started coming. It cost him tens of thousands of dollars in penalties because he wouldn't take advice when he did hire somebody. Okay. And he wasn't willing to do the work. So after the 4th year, he didn't come back to me. I gave him a call and he says, well, he hired a CPA. He formed some S corporations. He formed a second S corporation. I taught him too well, evidently, because he went out and opened another business. But this way, the second business, he structured properly. And he brought the people on his team that would take care of it for him properly. So, I mean, so you have things from one end to the other that you sit and you work with people and try to figure out.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, oddly enough, we're getting towards the end of the podcast, and I've got my one question I want to ask. What is one book or podcast that has had a major influence on your life?
I have 2 books.
Sure.
And one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. The other is The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Yep.
Excellent books. Think and Grow Rich, you have to read when you first get it, you have to read it at least 3 times. He'll even tell you in the book, you have to read it 3 times and once a year after that would be good. And The Compound Effect is also, if you read that once in a while, it keeps you on focus. It really, really does. They're very good books. Yeah.
And there's a few books that I read regularly, and those are the 2. The Compound Effect. There's a couple of others that I'll read as well, but yeah, there's amazing books with a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom in them. Well, Roger, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate you being here.
I enjoyed the conversation immensely.
Me as well. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Roger, check out the link in the description.